Amazing. So without further ado, I won't take up too much time. Really excited today to introduce our speaker, Colin, from the Solana Foundation team. And then today we'll be talking about Solana Pay.
GM, thank you, Joanna, for that warm introduction. So as Joanna just mentioned, we're going to be talking about Solana Pay today. And I'm actually quite excited to give this workshop, especially because I get to kind of show the other side of Solana Pay that people don't really see, especially given the name is called Solana Pay. Everybody just attributes it to just being payments focused alone. But what I'm going to show is that you can actually use it for a variety of use cases outside of payment. So I don't know if I should just jump in and start, or should we wait for more people to stream in? Or
All good. Yeah, feel free to share your screen.
oh, awesome, awesome. So I guess I'm gonna try to start this off by getting people as excited as possible. So what I'm going to show you is one of those use cases that I spoke about that uses Solana Pay behind the hood, but something to do, something that uses Solana Pay under the hood, but nothing to do with payment. So what you'll see, this is actually like an on-chain game. It's called Seven Seas, and it was built by Jonas, who is also in the developer relations team. But of course, he's focused on building on-chain games. And what you'll notice in the top left corner is a QR code, which, funny enough, I tested this with Phantom just before I came on, and I think the latest update on Phantom has some issues with Solana Pay transaction requests. So what I'm going to do, I've got my Soulflare wallet open, and I've just scanned this QR code. And what it's going to do once I approve the transaction is you'll notice that the monster is going to fire off that attack. And that was just done by scanning this QR code that you see on the screen. So again, it's just to kind of like highlight almost like how Solana Pay works, where irrespective of what you're trying to do, if you have like a QR code or a QR code based flow, Solana Pay can work amazingly, especially outside of payments. I'm just going to scan this again just in case people missed it. Where I'm going to scan the QR code on my Soulflare wallet. And just in case you're trying to scan this yourself, if you can, you'll need to be on DevNet because that's where this particular game is deployed to. So once I approve that transaction again, it's going to fire off, the month is going to fire off its attack, which I think, is kind of like a really cool thing to do. And again, just kind of like shows what Solana Pay is capable of. And for this workshop, what I'm going to do is kind of just like walk you through some basics about what Solana Pay is, its origin story, and kind of why it was created in the first place. And then we're going to talk briefly about something called Solana Pay transaction requests, which is what enables this thing to happen where you can scan a QR code and it can fire off a transaction that causes a monster to fire off an attack. We're going to go through that. And then I also want to show some like real life use cases of Solana Pay in the wild. Some of them are payments related, some of them are not, just to kind of give you the full scope or the full understanding of what you can potentially build in this hackathon using Solana Pay. So without further ado, I will get going. The first question is like, why Solana for payments? And I think this hopefully is quite obvious, but it's actually blockchains were initially created for the payments use case. I think kind of like over the years, as we've seen the ecosystem mature, I personally haven't really seen almost like a big push or big foray into payments. And it's kind of like we haven't tackled the obvious use cases first. And in terms of why Solana for payment, it kind of always goes without saying that transaction fees are extremely low. it's almost like very fast settlement to the point where I'll probably call it it's instant, and it has a very high throughput with the kind of like the main ingredients one would need to build like a enterprise grade payments infrastructure. So like Solana has all of the necessary building blocks for almost that realization of what commerce or what payments can be on chain, how that can actually look like. I think Solana is one of the blockchains that are like very well prepared and has like the right tech infrastructure to power that. Oh, and I guess just before I continue to go on, if you have any questions at any time, just either drop it in the chat, drop it as a question. I kind of like to be interrupted during my my workshop. So yeah, please feel free to send a message or ask a question at any time. So again, Solana Pay specifically um, was I'd say like originally created for how to do commerce on chain in a way that, for example, if you have a let's say an e-commerce store or a point of sale system, how can you marry up or match up actual transaction order. So let's say somebody wants to buy a t-shirt or something on your store. How can you match that up with a transaction that happens on chain? Because yes, for example, you could just have your wallet address on your website and you get people to send the required amount for a particular item. But again, it's like how do you actually link a transaction on your store to a transaction that you see in your wallet? That's the first case that Solana Pay was created for. But then kind of like over time, the protocol itself has matured, which we'll get to see in a bit, where it's now gone beyond just a simple commerce transaction to we've seen people mint NFTs with Solana Pay, issue tickets, verify tickets, and kind of like in the demonstration that I gave at the start, you can now even use Solana Pay within a fully on-chain game. So like the realm of possibilities of what you can actually build is technically limitless because once we start looking at transaction requests, is that you can create uh, any transaction that is a valid Solana transaction, you can do that with Solana Pay transaction request. But it's very limitless in terms of what you can build. And I just hope in like the next, I guess, 30 to 35 minutes that I have is to kind of like showcase the potential of what Solana Pay can actually do. Yeah, so as mentioned, the initial spec was designed to do a simple commerce transfer on chain. So the V1 of the Solana Pay spec introduced something called transfer request. The transfer request is like I kind of like phrase it like it's the simplest version of what Solana Pay is, where there's a particular URL, and in this URL that you have is encoded all of the parameters required to do a transfer on chain. So again, going back to the e-commerce example, it's like, for example, you would have the merchant, and that's the wallet address of the store that you're trying to buy from. You'll have the amount, and that's like literally how much this item costs, and you can either denominate it using native SOL or any SPL token. And you also have something called a reference. And this was the kind of it's the key thing that's actually needed to tie an e-commerce transaction to a transaction that happens on chain, because that reference that you embed, or sorry, as you encode in the URL, it's supposed to be unique, and that's the way you kind of link up to say, okay, if I can find this particular reference that was related to a particular transaction on my store, once you see a transaction in your wallet with that same reference, you have like a certain confidence that the transaction that you see on your wallet is related to somebody trying to buy a t-shirt from your store, for example. And I can see a question that says, can the wallet address of the store be a smart contract address? And yes, it can. There's like no stipulation of what that wallet address is, as long as it's a valid public key. Yeah, it'll just work. Um, is there any criteria behind that? Yeah, no. So anything that's a valid public key, you can use that as the wallet address for the particular merchant. So the spec in itself is designed in a way that it's very open in terms of like there is no like any hard and fast requirement of what these parameters can be, as long as the reference you choose is a public key, that would work. The amount is also like it could be any particular amount, because you have the option again to denominate the transaction in native Sol or using any SQL token. So I think the only stipulation in the transfer request spec is that the reference you choose has to be a public key. Anything else, like there's no hard requirements on any of the other parameters. I should actually probably just open up that spec. So the docs can be found on docs.solanapay.com. But don't worry, at the end of this session, I will share the link to the slides, which also has like the yeah, some like relevant links that you can follow. As mentioned in the original Solana Pay transfer request, you have the recipient, which again is just a public key for the merchant. You have the amount, which is again the amount that this particular item costs. There's actually an option to leave this amount blank. And the way the wallets were told to implement it is if the amount is empty, it means that you, the user, gets to specify what that amount is. So that's kind of like a way if you wanted to do, let's say, for example, send a tip. When you want to tip someone, uh, as using the Solana Pay transfer spec, you can give the tipper, if that's the right term, the ability to choose the amount. The SPL token is also optional. So if you don't have the SPL token parameter, it means that you're trying to transfer native Sol. But if you want to use an SPL token, you just put the SPL token mint, and that would then initiate the transfer for a particular SPL token. The reference, again, that's just a unique public key, and this is probably the most important parameter there is, because that is what again links a e-commerce transaction to a transaction that you see on chain. And the label, method, and memo, these are all just strings to kind of give the user more awareness of the transaction that they are about to sign for. But again, this is like the Solana Pay transfer request, and you can kind of see like I kind of grade it out, even though this is something that exists, it doesn't really get used much because it's very limiting, where it can literally only do a simple transfer. So then there was the V2 of the spec, which introduced something called transaction request, which is what you saw a demonstration of at the start when I scanned this QR code and it was able to cause the monster to fire. That's using something called Solana Pay transaction request. I'm just gonna take a little drink. So transaction request, it's so flexible, and I'm like so excited to speak about it because it literally just opens up the possibilities of what is possible with Solana Pay. And I guess actually before I kind of like walk through how transaction requests work, I just kind of want to show this demonstration here. And I just hope you can see this clearly. So this is an implementation that was done by the MetaCamp team, where they have a particular, they have almost like an on-chain access card. And with this pass, they actually give you access to like their physical location. Again, this is done with Solana Pay transaction requests. So they have the ability to literally unlock a door using Solana Pay. And I think this is like one of the uh, coolest integrations that I've seen, where so now you sign the transaction with your wallet and then it unlocks the door for you. So again, this kind of just like shows again what the scope of transaction requests are, where you can actually now have a physical in real life experience using Solana Pay, and it's not even payment related. So I hope that video played correctly. I'm seeing a couple smiles. I'm seeing a smile from Joanna, so I guess it did. um, yeah, so it's something that's like really cool, and I kind of just wanted to showcase this as again to kind of like open up your mind in terms of what Solana Pay is actually capable of. And yeah, like I said, this is kind of like one of the really cool integrations. So to kind of like understand technically how this works, um, there is two bits of things that are required. One, you actually need to have a server, and by server, this could just be like, for example, a cloud function or a Lambda function on AWS and EC2 instance. It's really up to you, but you just need to have a server that you control that needs to do two things. One, it needs to respond to a GET request, and two, it needs to respond to a POST request. So what happens in the case where, for example, this QR code is scanned? What is embedded in this QR code is a URL to your server, and what the spec states in terms of what the wallet is supposed to do is once that QR code is scanned, the wallet would make a GET request to the URL that's embedded in the QR code, and your server needs to respond with an icon and a label. And let me just see if I can actually. So this is something that you can kind of like test yourself. As mentioned, you can kind of like use Soulflare or Glow, where once I scan this QR code that I see on screen, the wallet is going to provide me with a particular UI that shows me an icon and a label. I was about to kind of like show it on my video, but I guess the video is even blurred, so you're not going to see it anyway. Um, so yeah, the wallet would show me an icon and a label, and this is just to kind of give you the user confidence that you're actually interacting with the correct store or just interacting with the correct thing. So it's just to kind of like give you a visual cue on what you're about to interact with. And then when you press allow, your server now needs to respond with needs to respond to a post request. And in this post request, your server just needs to return a valid Solana transaction. So kind of like this is where things get interesting, especially with the game, where the transaction that I return is to initiate this monster that you have in the background to actually fire. And in the case of what Metacam built, um, what they built is that their server, so in this case, there is no QR code interaction. It's working with like an NFC tag, but kind of like the steps is the same. It just so happens that that first part of entry is not scan the QR code. In this case, it's just like interact with an NFC tag. And again, the way that their one works is now their server responds with a transaction, and that transaction is literally to open the door. And what you'll see in some of the other examples is like you'll see people have used Solana Pay transaction requests to mint NFTs. They used it to open doors, buy tickets, even like validate if somebody uh, has a particular token for you to kind of like enable some token data experiences. Yeah, so once the wallet makes a post request to your merchant server, the only thing that the wallet needs to send is the public key. So that means now the server, which in this case is something that you own, can actually offer a dynamic experience. So because you have the user's wallet address, you can, for example, check what tokens that they have, what NFTs that they've had, what programs or protocols on chain they've interacted with, for you to kind of like create a customized experience. And I think this is kind of like where things, at least for me, get quite exciting. Because now if you think about it, you as a merchant can like easily do some kind of program where, for example, if somebody has a Mad Lad, you can offer them some kind of custom experience on your store without you even have to talk to the Mad Lad's team for some kind of collaboration. And I think this is kind of like where some of the other benefits of being on chain come in, where now you can just like permissionlessly integrate with almost like anything. So because you have the person's wallet address, you can again check how many transactions that they've had on chain. You can see what experiences that they have. Um, yeah. Yeah, so you can kind of like see what experiences that they've had, what transactions that they've done on chain, what protocols that they've integrated with, again, for you to offer them a dynamic experience. So actually another thing that we've seen people build with this is kind of like some kind of like an on-chain reputation slash a program where, for example, you can, when somebody interacts with your store, as part of the transaction that you send back, you can kind of like give them a token to kind of like show that they've interacted with your store. And kind of like depending on how many tokens they've earned, again, you can kind of like offer that dynamic experience. So with the transaction request, I'll kind of like show you the code in a bit to show you how simple it actually is. Simple, but yet very powerful. I don't know if I want to like just have a quick pause if anybody has any questions on transaction requests or even transfer requests.
Of course, everyone, if any of you have any questions, please do feel free to just pop them into the chat.
Yep. Cool. So in case no questions come in, I just kind of like show some other integrations that we've seen with Solana Pay. So I kind of like, as I also mentioned, is you can kind of like create a minting experience with this. If I'm not mistaken, the first team to do this was actually Mountain Pay, where, for example, you can you can mint their NFT using Solana Pay transaction requests. So another project that we saw is called Maius Fun, which kind of like again, it's kind of like another in real life experience where you can take a picture on your phone and you can mint that picture straight away as an a collectible that gets sent straight to the wallet. And again, this is all done using Solana Pay transaction request, where again, because the transaction that your firm needs to respond with, this has to be a valid Solana transaction. You're actually not in a way like limited to what you can do. So another cool integration we saw was with Maius Fun, and I'll kind of just like play this in the background. Where you can take a picture, as I said, on your phone, mint it into your wallet or using Solana Pay transaction request. And I can see that this video doesn't want to load, which is okay. Another thing we've seen, and this was from the latest global hackathon that we have, and what this team built is actually a way to spend SPL tokens that you have using a card. So what you're going to see is like an integration with the Apple Pay wallet, where the card that you actually see being spent, it's actually tied to, it's not tied to like a actual bank account. It's actually tied to the tokens that you have in a particular wallet. So I think this is again quite cool. It can kind of um, pushes the need to have like actual in real life experiences. And what I really find cool about this is now it just gives you a way to spend tokens that you have in real life without having to do like any kind of off-ramp process with via like a P2P exchange or using a centralized exchange to off-ramp, for example, the USDC that you have. You can just take your USDC balance that you have in a wallet and spend it straight away, which I think is something that's also like uh, quite cool. And I think this is actually would push the narrative that blockchains are actually useful and there's actually like real use cases for them as well. So that project is called West 57, and they won the payments track for the last global hackathon that we had. Another project that we saw was SplitWave, and I'm just trying to find like a product stock. So yeah, SplitWave is kind of a way to, well, literally as the name suggests, it's a way to like split the payments. And I think that's kind of like one, I guess it's like a simple use case, but yet still an effective one. Especially like, let's say again, you go out with some friends, or you and your friends want to come together to pay for something. SplitWave actually gives you the opportunity to say, okay, I want to buy something for X amount, and I want to split it with um, uh, these particular um, people. And again, this is all done with Solana Pay transaction requests. And I'm actually just trying to still find the product deck just so you can kind of like see how it works. Maybe this would take us there. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Um, so yeah, it kind of like just looks like any wallet extension that you're typically used to. But you're then able to kind of say choose a particular amount, and you can choose the wallets or the people that you want to split that particular amount with, and you'll kind of just like handle the interface for that particular split. So this is kind of like another cool use case that we saw. Um, and yeah, this is also again using Solana Pay transaction requests. Another cool one is app, which I don't know if, well, if you are kind of like US based, you might be familiar with fintech apps like Venmo, Cash App, and the likes. Tap is kind of like the Solana version of that, where it just tries to like make it extremely easy for people to like send cash, or in this case, USDC. And again, it's kind of like a very simple app, but it's quite effective because I don't know if maybe if I can just show like the wallet experience, where for example, like you'll need to find out what the person's wallet address is, kind of like make sure you copy and paste the wallet address correctly, even to the point that I would kind of consider myself as a somewhat experienced user. And I found myself in the position where I've actually sent money to the wrong person just because I either miscopied the wrong P, and I've actually lost probably close to like $500 that way. So kind of like the Tap app is just to be a more UI slash a more user friendly approach. And again, I think that's something that I want to communicate, especially when you're trying to build an app or any protocol. I think you have to think about who your target audience and who the end user is, because there are so many people that we're trying to onboard into what like blockchain and cryptocurrencies are, but the experience is kind of like more geared towards either like crypto native users. So I think we kind of need to like mirror some like the best UX practices we've seen in Web 2 and Web 3. And again, using Solana and in this case, Solana Pay actually makes that possible because the chain is fast enough that the kind of like the experiences that I don't want to use the word normies are used to, you're actually able to showcase those experiences because the chain is fast enough to do exactly that. So Tap is again, it's like a Venmo or Cash App, but built on top of Solana Pay. Um, so just to kind of like round off on what transaction requests are, again, it's just the way to construct any valid Solana transaction using like a QR code, or in the case that we saw with the Metacam team, using the just a touch interface to actually execute a transaction on chain. Yes, it's very expandable. And I think the next thing I want to do is just show you the code for how that looks like. But I think maybe Tom has a okay, no, it's not a question. Um, so the Solana Pay docs are actually quite extensive, and they show you literally like how to one construct the URL that you need, and two, also like how to set up your server as well. And also as part of the resources that I have, we recently did a workshop in New York, which is kind of what led to this, where we kind of like walked people through on how to create the server that initiates this particular request. And all of those resources will be in the slides. But yeah, I just want to kind of like show um, how like the code looks like for your particular server. I'm just gonna open up my VS Code. Just going to stop sharing and then reshare my other screen.
Just a gentle reminder as well, guys. If you do have any questions, I appreciate it's a lot to take in these workshops, and I appreciate that. So yeah, if you do have any questions, this is an incredible time to ask now, as Colin is on the chat with us. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and I kind of want to speak on that point as well, especially because like these workshops are actually quite short. It is a lot to take in, but I think it's also important that it's not necessarily that you understand everything you see. It's just kind of more to kind of showcase like what the possibilities are, because of course once this particular workshop is done, there's different ways that you can kind of get in contact with the team if you have like any technical questions or even any to like just work on any particular ideas. Just feel free to reach out, and again at the end I'll kind of like put some details on how you can reach out to me or to the rest of the team post this quick workshop. Yes, I'm just going to kind of like walk you through the server that was built to handle the QR code that was scanned that caused the monster to fire off its attack. And you can kind of like see how relatively simple it is and how it's not actually any different to creating a normal on-chain transaction. So the main entry point for a function is this handler. And what this handler is responsible for is literally just to route the get and post responses into the right place so that once the wallet hits your server with a get request, it'll just route it to the handle get function. And if it was a post request, it'll just route it to the handle post function. So this is just like the entry point for when the wallet makes the request to your server. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the get function. And this again is very simple in terms of like the only responsibility for this function is to return a label and an icon. And these are the two bits of information that will get displayed to the user. So again, this is just a way to get the user to be kind of like comfortable and also just to give them like some visual cues on what they're about to interact with. So the label will just be shown in like the wallet pop-up UI with the name. For example, if you were an e-commerce store or was like a point of sale system, you'll probably have like the name of your store here. Again, it's just like to show the user that they're interacting with the right thing. And this icon can just be any image. I believe the supported formats are WebP, PNG, and JPEG. And again, this is just like to show you some visual cues to the user once they scan your QR code or they tap with some kind of NFC connectivity. So this is like quite simple and straightforward. And then you have the handle post function, which is kind of like essentially the main thing. And I've tried to write this in a way that is kind of mandatory. So this is the instruction. In this case, this is the thank you, GitHub Copilot. So this handle post, in here, all we're doing is just creating the instruction. And this is not just limited to one instruction. You can combine as many instructions as you need for whatever transaction you want to execute. But if you've kind of built any client-side application on Solana before, what's seen here is exactly the same. There are no new things that you kind of need to take into account when using transaction requests. It's just the same way you will construct any regular instruction and transaction using any client-side code. So in this case, we create the Cthulhu instruction, and that's just a particular instruction that is related to the 70s game that you saw earlier. And that instruction is just adding all of the accounts that are required for the Cthulhu instruction in the 70s on-chain game. So yeah, there's nothing really special going on here. So in the case of whatever you want to build, you'll literally just change this instruction to the instruction that you want to use. So for example, this could be an instruction to mint an NFT, or send an NFT, or send a token. It's like the possibilities are endless because the Solana Pay spec doesn't stipulate what type of instruction you have. You can literally create any instruction. I'll literally put like this can be any instruction. So you can even use this to like interact with any protocol that exists on chain, be it like you want to create a swap, you can do that. So like it's literally endless. And I just saw Augustine ask, can we get the repo to this code? You will. In fact, let me just share this in the chat now. So this is a link to the slides, and in one of the last slides, you would see the link to this particular repository and some other useful resources as well. So yeah, I just kind of like want to heavily stress on this point that the instruction that you create is literally anything that you would normally do outside of what Solana Pay is would actually work. So there's actually no limitation. The only things that are probably more specific to Solana Pay is what happens in this prepare transaction function. Because the server just needs to respond with a base 64 encoded transaction. So all we do here is the instruction that we created in the function above. We take that instruction, add it to our transaction object, and all of these are actually optional. So if you want, you can actually just omit these. But again, this was just to kind of like show that with transaction request, you can actually handle the transaction fees for anybody that's interacting with your particular store or whatever particular thing it is, which I think is actually something that's quite cool to do because, for example, now people can interact with the QR code that you have and they don't need to have Soul. So this could be like a cool onboarding experience where, for example, you have your QR code, you can literally go and like print them out and stick them anywhere. And anybody who is completely brand new can still interact with whatever your server is because you can optionally pay the transaction fee for them. So they don't even need to have Sol in their wallet to interact. I mean, the current fronted code you're reviewing. Yeah, so in the resources, on the last page, you would see it's actually the last link in the resources slide is the GitHub and the name of the repo is called Solana Pay Pirates. That's the code that we're reviewing at the moment. That's just to answer Augustine's question. So yeah, as the preparing of the transaction, these are actually optional. But again, it kind of just like gives you some different possibilities of what you can do in terms of, again, just like optionally paying the transaction fee for people interacting with your store, your server, don't need to have Sol in their wallet. And because we are the fee payer, yep.
Oh, sorry, Colin. I just wanted to say we had a question, but feel free to continue.
What was the question?
Tom asks, could you recommend some kind of useful project I can build for the hackathon using Solana Pay? I appreciate we went through some examples already, but maybe you have some tips and tricks on people on one, starting out with Solana for the first time, and also two, narrowing it down, which is also half the battle.
Exactly, yeah. Cool, yeah, I would do that because there's actually a really cool site that you can go to for ideas. So yeah, I'll show you that in a moment. Yeah, so just like to run off this piece of code, in this case, we need to partially sign the transaction because we have chosen to be the fee payer. So because Sol is about to get deducted from your particular wallet, your signature is required. So that's the only reason why this partial sign is there. And it will simply serialize the transaction and return it. And once that transaction gets returned, the wallets have implemented the spec in a particular way where the transaction that you return would get coded on the wallet side, and then the wallet will just ask you to sign. So again, this is very straightforward. And I guess if you are going to build something using Solana Pay transaction request, you this code exactly as it is. And probably, yeah, the only thing that you need to change is the instruction, and everything else will just automatically work. So yeah, it's quite simple if you are used to writing any client-side code for Solana already. If this is something that's like completely brand new to you, you can kind of just like relate it to just like building any kind of like Web2 API. It just kind of like follows the same structure. The only difference is that you just need to build a valid Solana transaction. So yeah, as mentioned, this code can be found in the resources on the slide. So I'm now just going to go back and this. And in terms of different ideas, so for example, I don't know if you're familiar with build.superteam.fun, but this is actually where people in the ecosystem, but also people that work at Solana Labs, go can actually like submit different ideas. And there is a payment section, which kind of like shows you different things that people in the ecosystem would like to see. So because it's payments related, you can kind of find like, I guess, a project that is useful to build with Solana Pay. But kind of like as mentioned, since Solana Pay is not limited to payments, you can actually just like find any category that you are more interested in, and seeing that if Solana Pay transaction request is something that could work. So I'm just gonna paste this in the chat, and I'll also add it as one of the resources on the slides. So I'll update that after this call. Any other questions regarding Solana Pay, or I guess the hackathon in general? Oh, glad that could be a help. Yep. Yeah, so the build.superteam.fun is a great resource. Yeah, especially if you're running low on ideas. Yeah, it's got quite an extensive list. And yeah, also you can even use it to like submit some of the ideas that you have for yourself that you may or may not have intended to.
Awesome. Yeah, just to echo that, I've never actually heard of that website. So I'm very much like I'm also very impressed by this. But no, really great to hear. Of course. Maybe just before we wrap things up, if there are no more questions, of course, could you drop the links down on how people could reach you? Best way to reach the team or otherwise in that. Just so as they're brainstorming, maybe some questions pop up, might be good to know in advance.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you for that, because I would have forgotten. So I think the best way, if you have a technical question, would be to use the Solana Stack Exchange. And if this is not in my resource list, forgive me, I'll add it there. Well, yeah, if you have like any particular question or you get stuck, please feel free to ask on the Stack Exchange. And if it's Solana Pay specific, you can just use like the Solana Pay tag, and I'll be monitoring this religiously to see like if there's any new questions, and then I can try to answer it in a decent amount of time. In terms of my Discord, I think preferably the best place would either be Telegram or Twitter. And I'll just share what my Telegram or Twitter is, because my Discord is very messy. So I find it hard to like keep up with the various servers there. So yeah, Twitter DM or message me on Telegram on at this handle. That will be like the best way. And if it's a more technical question, it's just better to ask it on the Stack Exchange because this also gives other people the ability to actually learn from the answers as well. So yeah, the Stack Exchange will be a very good resource for you if you get stuck technically. Otherwise, yeah, please feel free to message me on Twitter or Telegram.
Amazing, awesome. And just to echo that, I'm not entirely sure, of course, but I'm sure we do have a technical questions Discord section in the Solana Hackathon. I'm not too sure who's part of it in the Solana Foundation team, but I'm pretty sure someone will be there from the team, whether it's Colin or someone else, to ask questions. So if that is the case, do drop them in there as well. If you are struggling to find a place to kind of put your questions, and we will tag the appropriate person and make sure they reply to you shortly. But other than that, thanks, Colin, for the links.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll make sure I update the slides with those extra links.
Amazing, amazing. And as Colin says, he'll be monitoring, as we always love to hear, any questions throughout the hackathon. So yeah, do feel free to connect, whether it's on Telegram, Twitter, or any other platform. But if there are no more questions, I just wanted to, say a massive thank you to Colin for joining us today. It's been a really great workshop. And for me, I've learned a lot, really enjoyed hearing about the different ways that Solana Pay can be used. And yeah, just looking briefly over the bounties, a lot of innovation and creativity available here in the bounties. They are very open-ended kind of bounties. So yeah, please do take this time to really go for it, and yeah, use that incredible resource that Colin used and shared in the chat. But without further ado, then I won't keep you guys too long. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, and thank you so much for joining us. Nevin is not here tomorrow as well, so I'll be taking over that workshop too. But if that is all, I shall see you all tomorrow. And thanks again, Colin.
Awesome. Thank you.
No worries. Bye, everyone.